So here's what we're going to do today. We've spent the last 6 weeks or so presenting a lot of information, and there's been opportunity for questions and clarification and all that good stuff. But today's going to be kind of like a wrap-up because we're going to move on to some other topics, some other things in next week, and then into November and December and Advent as well. So we've had about 6 weeks that I'm going to just take a quick few minutes to summarize sort of where we've been, and then talk a little bit about your responses, any thoughts you've had and haven't had a chance to share, a little bit of thinking together about what might be, what then shall we do now that we've learned all these things from these many people. So we started back on September 21st, if you can remember back that far, all the way, and I gave us a sort of a little lecture attempting to set the scene, set the stage for why the idea of environmentalism, why caring for creation is something that the church is and should be involved in, right? Some theological and scriptural foundation for the work we were going to be doing. And it was, partial, as these things often are, because in such a large topic, and by virtue of the fact that there is so much out there that has been written and said on this very topic. So we are not trying to reinvent anything here. We're not trying to make an argument that is ours alone to make. So you've got everyone from the late Pope Francis to Patriarch Bartholomew, and not to mention Jesus and Paul and the Old Testament and everybody using the natural world as a way to understand God and actually to manifest God. So not just metaphors to be mined for our own deeper understanding and faith, but actually what we were really trying to get to was a representation of that divine creator who brought all of creation into being. Trying to open up our minds and hearts in that way. Then Jared had a week talking to you a little bit more about how the church has tried to do that in its liturgies and some of its programming and some of its policies and various things. And the Episcopal Church is by no means the only church that is working on this. And within certain denominations, you'll see some churches with a great charism for this kind of work, and you'll see others who couldn't be bothered. So it's hard to speak unilaterally around what the church is doing, but there's some ways in which, at least in the Episcopal Church and other denominations, we have attempted to find ways in which to incorporate these deeper understandings, these theological and scriptural understandings, into our prayers, our liturgy, our work, and our policies as well. So that was week 2. Then we started talking about composting, right? And I hope many of you have gone ahead and signed up for the composting program at home. And there's many ways in which to do that. If you're still curious about how to and whether you could pull it off, each week we've been running an announcement in the bulletin that has not just a sort of, do this thing, but some actual information you can click on and follow through to say, okay, this is how, if I miss the session or if I still am unclear, this is how, step by step, I would go about doing that. And I hope, I'm not going to call you out here to see who has actually started doing that, but I hope those of you who have found it to be, relatively painless, so to speak, and are starting to feel a little better and a little good about how much waste you are throwing away versus recycling versus composting. With the knowledge that soon, in a few months, eventually, you'll have the opportunity to get some of that back in the form of dirt, soil, the sort of humus, the Adam, the man of the earth that we come from. In the midst of all this, we've also had some so Tidewater Compost here was talking to us and telling us a little bit more about how to do that and why we might want to do that, and we at the church are trying to do that ourselves, to practice what we preach here, and so that's why we have our green compost bins out and about, and we appreciate your participation, and as we said before, your leadership in helping people to do that with us. Then we had a lovely flood, and we had... But we had the 4 best people probably to understand the implications of such flooding on October 12th with our panel from the front lines. These are folks working in the environmental work in Norfolk and Virginia Beach and sort of this Southampton Roads area, real leaders of organizations who are real leaders themselves in the public sphere on this. So we had Wetlands Watch, we had the Elizabeth River Project, we had the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and we had Lynnhaven River Now, all represented up here, if you remember, those four remarkable women doing really, really strong work in this sphere. And they offered their own thoughts about both the challenges we face, but also the opportunities that are before us on the individual and the corporate scale as well. And then last week we had the Norfolk Botanical Gardens here, the executive director there, Peter Schmidt, talking to us about their general mission, but also some of what they're trying to do with the Garden of Tomorrow, which is to continue to not only to open up natural spaces for folks to come and encounter nature and have that divine experience, that sacred moment, that will hopefully inspire in them a desire to love, care for, cherish, protect, restore it. And then, given that, but also to have the chance to really preserve some of the plant life and species that are in danger of going extinct due to the changing climate and some of our practices as human beings. So we had a little show and tell as well, which was fun. In the midst of all that, we've had some other voices who've come in from the sides, not on Sunday morning here, but we had Margaret Renkel come and talk. Many were reading her Comfort of Crows book, which is a year of weekly meditations on really just the small window, literally a small window, out onto her backyard and surrounding neighborhood, and the ways in which that opened up into a universe that was deeper and richer and gave great cause for reflection and then knowledge as well, deeper wisdom. And we also, we had, in my book group that I've been running for the last couple of months, we read a book by Norman Wurzba that we discussed just last Friday called This Sacred Life. Norman Wurzba is a professor of ecology and theology at Duke Divinity School and has written a really excellent book that is not the easiest to get through. It's not sort of written in the sort of essay form or the personal narrative form that Margaret Renkel writes in, but is more academic, but still approachable, about trying to help us to understand, really give some deep grounding and meat to these theological convictions that we have. Not just because, well, God made it, so it's good and we should protect it, but really getting into this understanding of what it means, our understanding of what it means to be a human being, right? How we answer the question of what it means to be human, or how we understand the earth, matters to the decisions we make about it. So, just as a brief example, if that fundamental question is, say, what are human beings? If you answer it saying, human beings are individual, isolated units who are questing for supremacy and priority simply so they can survive and promulgate their DNA through the world, that's one way of understanding what a human being is as a biological creature. On the other side, if you can say a human being is a part of a massive network, or meshwork is the word he's using, that is no better or worse, but simply very important within a larger framework, and is not only dependent upon but responsible to other things and people and creatures, if you understand human beings in that relational sense, then you're going to have a different opinion about what we should do about plastic bags in the grocery store, so to speak. So those kind of fundamental philosophical questions play out on the surface level in ecological terms. Not strictly so, but in one of the ways in which we talk about those things. So the book was helping us to think a little bit more deeply about that. Same with the earth. Is the earth there for you, or are you there for it? I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to think about it. But once you've made that distinction or decision, you're on two different paths. And you keep walking down those paths, and that's how we get to a place of such difference in understanding, just fundamental understanding of how we should relate to the world around us. All right, so that's all that we've been talking about. That's all that's been in the atmosphere around here in the last 6 weeks. So I'm going to open it up to you a little bit. Let's start not with recommendations or ideas or, we should do this. But let's start with any impressions, reflections, any particular memories from those 6 weeks that stand out to you that you just want to throw into the room. Andrew, please get us started.
Well, an atheist friend of mine says that environmentalism for him is not just a matter of anything mystical or spiritual or even sentimental, but a matter of long-term self-interest.
Yeah.
Which I'm inclined to agree with.
I think if we are able to have a long-term enough view and a broad enough view, I think that's absolutely right. I think what we in this context would offer is one of the reasons for that is not just a sort of resource allocation management question. It's a moral and ethical question. And he may not have the same framework within to work, but for us, there are things in which decisions we're making that are causing harm and making life, broadly defined, worse for people, for animals, for things. And in that sense, there is not just a rational explanation for this, there's also the inspirational, spiritual side of it too. So both of those things can coexist and be working towards the same end. So tell your friend to come next time, and we'll have him here. That's good. Margaret.
One of the things, there are two juxtapositions of this, that you can look at, it's just me. I'm tiny. What difference is it going to make in my little small yard?
I forgot this was just for the people who will watch later.
What difference is it going to make if my small yard isn't really environmentally sound? And, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But on the grand scheme of things, we are all stewards of the earth.
Right.
And if we don't really take care of our little corner of the earth, how big or small it is, and that has a trickle-down effect, then really it's really going to cause us Christians.
Well, I think that's, but we always get this thought or this feeling, right? When we're talking about this issue, it's like, what actual difference can I make? And we can sort of talk ourselves up and say, like, look, composting is going to help a little, but the amount of oil that's still being pumped out of the earth is not actually going to change the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So they were saying, like, what's the point? But there's so many points that I think we've heard throughout these various perspectives that say, actually, not only is it a question of authenticity. If you're going to preach this, you should practice it in your own way. And there's the opportunity then to be someone who has that echo effect, where you do something and someone else sees it and does something, and someone else sees it and does something. And there's a fundamental orientation, and this is where Margaret Renkel was really wonderful, but others were saying this as well. There's a fundamental orientation towards life that as you get more active and involved, you hopefully, in gardening and composting, in working on environmental issues, hopefully you start to see all things, the world, the universe, whatever, as sacred and worth cherishing, protecting, being in relationship with. And the amplification of that reaches beyond just the environmental side of things, right? So, hey, Carolyn, you can throw those in the kitchen. Yep, thanks. That is a sort of a question that goes far deeper and I think reaches even further into what we need to be about as members of this church, as Christians, as human beings, encouraging that perspective. So composting on the surface can seem small, but in reality, if you really get into it, not only does it actually make a significant difference in your own habits, and if we start collectively doing it, we can start to really move the needle a little bit, at least here in this place. And we are engaging in a practice, a habit, a discipline that is spiritually rich and will hopefully then amplify in that sense in the way that the Holy Spirit does in ways that we don't even know. So that's a number of the reasons I think we should do things even when we feel like it's a mountain and we've got a little pebble in our hand, Other thoughts? Yeah, Austin, here, let me bring this to you.
Yeah, I know for me, the family and I moved up here late July from Florida, so it's been fun coming to these and seeing, like we all said, the Norfolk Botanical Gardens we want to go to soon, and seeing like the different organizations that we can help out and be a part of. I know that's been a blessing And so, it's kind of like what she said, the little things as far as composting and being more mindful of the environment. I know that's been a blessing. And then just to give a funny story, I'm going to tell them my parents here. But they have a nice backyard, and they have a place to compost, so they've been really getting into composting the last 3 weeks. We have a family dog, and this week they were like, oh, we have these grapes that we can toss out there. Well, grapes are very poisonous to dogs. And so they threw the grapes in the backyard, and then the light bulb came on, and they're like, wait a second, we can't put grapes out there. Josie will go dig up and possibly eat the grapes. So they spent like an hour in the garden.
Digging back out the grapes.
The grapes of wrath.
But so just these little things,
That's funny.
even though composting is simple, kind of like what you said, if you have friends that come over, they'll be like, why do you have that garden back there? Why do I see eggshells? And you can kind of bring it up and say, oh, we're trying to be more mindful in composting. And so even though it's something small, other people will see it and be like, oh, maybe I should do the same thing. And where did you go for resources? And we can say, oh, Tidewater.
Yeah, perfect.
And kind of.
You can lead them in and you can get a referral. Yeah, get some. No, but isn't that also like, we can make the same argument about the sort of ineffectiveness of our particular actions in anything we're doing, from the sense of, look, I'm just little old me. And so why should I be loving? Why should I be caring? And I'm not trying to pick on you, Mark. I'm saying this is exactly the kind of question and conversation we need to be having, because this is very much one of the main issues that keeps people from doing anything. The idea is twofold. One, you are in control of certain things in your life, the choices that you make, and therefore we ask, within the Christian framework, for you to make positive, loving, good choices that bring about life, that heal, not harm. So there's the individual sort of working out one's own salvation in fear and trembling. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that sort of shining your light in the darkness kind of idea, to say, this is something I can do. I do not know what could happen, but that is not what is in my control. What is in my control is to do the thing and trust, believe, hope that this will have some impact beyond just the immediate. So that's true across the board for us, on environmental things, but also on pretty much anything. So for us to start to think, again, why we as a church have some recourse and resource to lend to this work is precisely that bigger story that we think we are participating in when we do things that are good, kind, loving, all that. Thank you. Joanne, and then, yes.
I want to just commend the church for the education that is being provided to all of us, and the action and practice. Because once you know, you become aware. Once you're aware, you can see through a different lens from that point forward. And that whole echo effect that you talk about is very prevalent in your life then. And if you're over at somebody's house and they say, why do you do this? And you explain, then you've now shared the information and they might start to think differently. Years ago, I was at a friend's house for dinner and helping them put things away, and I was looking for a Ziploc bag, and she's like, oh no, just put it in this. And I said, yeah, but it's like a grab and go, it's dry. It didn't make sense to me to get a dish dirty. And she said, well, it doesn't make sense to me to put plastic. And I was like, what? And I have bought Ziploc bags since then. Yeah. And we had like half a bag of trash every week. And it's all because everything is very thoughtful about how we do what we do. Yeah. So it matters.
No, it does matter. And there's an intentionality there that matters. And there's also a practicality. And so one of the things we wanted to do with these 6 weeks was not only keep our head in the clouds, but also put our feet on the ground to be able to say, all right, here's some ways in which you can do this. And we can do this together. Now, we also should not kid ourselves and say that solitary individual actions will ultimately solve this problem. It needs to eventually turn into collective action. And so we're trying to do that here as a church, But you heard from our four ladies up here, there are policies, there are laws, there are ways and there are incentives that can be one way or another in our common life, and I mean in the public sphere. And so we also need to be aware, attentive, and then take action in that realm as well, and not be shy about that at the same time. And I think we're pretty talented. We can do both those things at the same time. But yes, you had a question.
Sorry, I'm not a member of this church, but
Not yet.
not yet. But my daughter, Brittany's dad goes out, and he retired, and as retired goes, you have to find something to do. So he walked the dog, and had this wonderful dog, and he first started around the neighborhood, and he would bring home trash in his hands. And then he realized, well, he'd bring a little plastic Walmart bag. And then he was bringing 4 plastic Walmart bags. And then he was bringing this big, trash bag. And then so he goes out with the dog 4 times a day, walking the dog every 4 hours, and he picks up trash around the town. And he's the trash man.
The trash man, yeah.
So he has really cleaned out our little roads, and it's unbelievable the amount of trash that people dump out, more than ever before, I believe.
Yeah.
People are just not getting or have forgotten the message that those of us who, grew up in the 60s, had that message of, you don't throw out trash in your window. They have never learned that.
Right.
But there he is, retired, and so everyone can do that. Get a dog. And
For a walk, yeah.
and bring a few trash bags and just pick up as you go, and your place looks much better, and pick out a little neighborhood to go in and have fun, and brings home all kinds of stuff, and the dog eats all the French fries from
Leftover stuff.
It's amazing people that dump out buns from McDonald's.
Oh.
They just eat the meat or something, and they throw out food. It's weird.
That is interesting. That's a helpful thing, though. Again, other practical things. And they say this sort of reduce, reuse, recycle, right? You've heard those. All of us have heard those. Reduce is a big part of that. Reduce the amount of stuff that you're buying and have and think you need. Reuse the things you can. I'm not like this, but I hear it from my father-in-law all the time. That's not broken. Or you don't need to throw that away. I can fix it. Just give me a second. Sometimes that works. But there's a different mindset. And so all of these little practices shift our minds and our hearts, and then hopefully our lives. Maybe in that order or maybe in a different order, right? So one of the ways, and this is, again, true of Christian discipleship writ large, that something needs to stick, either an idea or something you see that really moves your heart, or something you've done with other people that feels really powerful, that then shifts your life in a new direction. And the hope and the prayer is enough people can have their lives shifted in a positive and constructive direction, that then we can actually have made a change or a difference on the broader scale. Yeah, Susan.
Has there been any move from this church to coordinate or educate other Episcopal churches in the area, other church communities, and get them on board with the programs that you have initiated for us to get on board with?
Not yet is the short answer to your question. And I think the hope is, as we seek to amplify our work here, is that there are some networks that are established, like denominational networks, where we could do that kind of thing. Now, for the most part, I think they'd be on board. It's not a hard sell for most of them from a philosophical standpoint. But we might be able to offer some practicalities as well. So our hope is that we can use this 6 weeks to sort of springboard us not only into more fully doing this ourselves, but helping to spread the message as well. Absolutely. Yeah. Meryl.
Yeah, acknowledging that not one size fits all, have we created like a one-page systematic algorithm that people can sort of follow. Like, oh, I have this here, I'm going to come up with this on my refrigerator, it's laminated, it won't go away, and these are the things I can do each day.
Okay.
Type of thing. I think that might, at least that's.
Yeah. So not strictly about just the composting, but like having some things to say, here are some things around, stuff that I have. Yeah. Yeah.
That I keep on doing.
Yeah.
It's sort of like.
Build some habits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you always have that on the refrigerator, and then we're all sort of like following the same guidelines
Yeah.
in our own realm.
That's the military man in you. So-
Everybody following the same guidelines, doing the same thing. Systematic algorithm. Yeah, well, Jared, we need a systematic algorithm. We'll get it right on. No, I like the idea. No, what we want to do is make, what is it? Peter Marin, who worked with Dorothy Day. And if you don't know Dorothy Day's story, stop what you're doing and go Google that or look her up as well. He said, we want to make it easy for people to do good. And so what are the ways in which we can facilitate people doing good things? I mean, it sounds simple, sounds almost simplistic, but actually a lot of our work is meant to do that very thing. So we have some ways in which we're doing that. We want more ideas in which the ways we can do that, and we hope that others will continue to develop those ways as well. So a one-page systematic algorithm, if that's what makes, no, I'm serious, if that's what it takes to be able to say, here's some basic practices, some best practices, that would be good. Yeah, John. Here, I'm good.
Oh, just that we are communal animals.
Communal animals, we are, yes.
Most of the time, anyway.
Yeah.
And that in the process of that, you have to recognize that, I'm going to say the macro picture actually does come down to the micro picture.
Yeah.
And for example, the small lawn and the leaves and whatever we're talking about here for a minute or two ago. 40% of what goes into our landfills are all of that detritus.
Yeah.
Now, and, so you have to, so getting it down to micro level, that leaf that fell on your front lawn is also going to make your trash pickup that much more expensive.
Right.
If you don't take care of it on site.
Yeah.
And again, there's a reason why we think community. You go to cops and everybody becomes a gang if it's 6 people together or something. Again, we are communal animals in some sense of the term, whether you like what it is the 6 people are doing. Using your military example, now you send them out in 6 in crowds of 6. To go do whatever it was they needed to do out in the field.
Yeah.
And, so enlarge and realizing that macro did make a difference to the macro is the way at least I personally would phrase it.
One of the things we talked about in our book group on Friday is that the author does a great example of saying, this opening your perspective, once you start to do this, it gets really complex in a beautiful way really fast. So he's using the example of like the loaf of bread on your table. If you really were to contemplate how it got there, you're thinking about farmers states away. You're thinking about the agricultural, scientific, biological, miraculous process of seed and wheat and grain being turned into something edible. Right? You're thinking about the work that it takes, the hours of labor to harvest it and then process it. Then you get into the whole idea of how you move things like that around. And all of a sudden, this little piece of bread becomes immense in its connectedness. And it was a great example in the sense of, again, he uses the metaphor of mesh work to understand the world. Deeply connected. Strongly connected, such that if you snip one of those, it loses its tension, and all of a sudden things start to slip through or fall apart. And so this idea of the connectivity of all of that is a perspective that we need to have in mind, and the way in which we need to be participating with that kind of perspective. So our actions, our decisions, our leaf actually does relate to all of this stuff. I'm going to go back here to Tim, then Connie and Vicki, I'm going to come back to you over there, okay?
So with the Elizabeth River project, did you ever talk about the River Star homes?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was explained, but the Advent Church, they were presented an award at one of their luncheons because they're a River Star church.
Nice. Yes.
So it's in the diocese already. Some churches are further down the path than others or whatever.
Yeah.
And something we contemplated at the Church of the Ascension and decided that's too hard, so we're still working on it.
Well, no, but it's true. And can we run that over here? Run the mic over there. Just thank you, Jamie. But that's right. There are places that are doing this, and there are good. I mean, part of the hope here was to show you we are not doing this alone. There are lots of people literally in our communities that are working on this, in our churches. And so should we wish to become a little more vocal and visible in our desire to make a difference on this, we are going to find partners popping up all over the place. And so it does not have to feel quite so isolating. And that was one of the hopes from bringing in some guests for us these last few weeks. Connie, yeah.
Just wondering if this idea of recycling and reuse and composting and so forth has been discussed with your Thursday meetings and feeding of people who are homeless.
Yes.
And how they would feel about this, if it even matters. We live in a financially strapped community for the most part. We are the minority sitting here.
Yep.
And there's a whole group in our city that I don't know that they would care about this, and I'm just wondering about them. My heart goes out to Food Lion,
Yeah.
who gives all of their leftovers to the food bank. And to me, that's recycling,
Yeah.
and that's, that's what we should be doing. So I have a little bit of a problem with this discussion because to me, this is not a third world problem. This is an upper class problem. And yes, I do recycle and I have a compost heap and all of that, but I'm just wondering about the majority in this community and the world as a whole.
This is a great question. This is a really important question. And Vicki, I'm going to let you talk about Thursday specifically in a second.
That's what I was going to
Okay.
comment about.
Yeah, so we are doing that on Thursdays and talking to our people about this, and Vicki can tell you how that's been received. Yes, there is this idea that environmental action is like a bourgeois concern, that it's like for people who have comfort, who have ease, who have it all, and they're the ones who need to, be a little more thoughtful about what they buy and everything, without actually changing the fundamental systems that result in having the majority of the world struggling to survive on a regular basis. And I've said the same thing. I was like, I would love to have an electric car. I can't really afford an electric car, and I make pretty good money. And so the idea that people who are making way less should be having, charging stations in a house that isn't even quite able to pay the electric bill on a regular basis, or all those other things, this is a fascinating and really important thing. Now, where it becomes important is to try to help those people understand that, yes, they may not be the ones who can put solar panels on the roof of their home because of the financial constraints and just the physical constraints of that. Or they may not be able to compost, or they may not want to compost because they're trying to save every last little crust and scrap, and they're willing to eat it in ways that we may not be. Now, there are inedible things to us that could still be composted, so that's still okay. I think it actually is highly empowering to those people a lot of times to say you actually still do have some control over your environment. And I've heard that from some folks that I've worked with in this, to say you can participate in the natural rhythms of the world that they're often more attuned to than we are, sleeping outside versus in our air-conditioned or heated homes. And if they want to, they're in some ways more in tune with that. But also by caring about this issue, one of the things we need to say again and again and again is the people who bear the brunt of our decisions not to care about this issue are far and away the marginalized, people of color, poor, living in situations where they cannot necessarily. You see this on the global scale with at the UN, right? Where all the tiny countries are saying, you guys are just running ahead with your fossil fuels and we are disappearing. So same idea, and so y'all need to do some stuff here for us. And so I think that is another element of it. And when we bring up the moral and ethical side of it, it's not just so we can feel good and more in tune with nature. It's so that we can feel like we're actually providing some things that are going to change the outcomes for those people for whom they may not have the same agency to do some of those same things. So that's some of the ways that I think about that, Connie, but it's an essential question for us to be thinking about. This is not just for us that we do these things. And when we come to talk about policies and laws and zoning and development and things like that, this touches on those things as well, because when we say we want to be environmentally friendly in the way that we build these things, how does that mix in and mesh with the need to provide a place to live and things like that? So it gets really important and really complicated. But Vicki, do you want to talk about Thursday a little bit?
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Connie. Thank you for asking that.
For the Thursday lunch ministry, for at least the last month, we have been doing composting. And the comment that I wanted to make about that is, in explaining to our guests what can be composted and not, we are reciting and learning, again, specific things that we can compost that we used to never be able to do. And so we are actually, by showing them, and then they're correcting us sometimes when we're taking a plate or something, that it's a two-way street that we're learning, because, as you said, they're more tuned in and more directly. So we feel like we're following their lead in a way. We're providing the compost bins, and you're going to recycle the cans. You can compost your plate. You can put all the dishes here. Just figuring out the sorting of things. We're getting better with it, and then we're going home and doing it at home better because of that interaction.
And I wonder the extent to which, if all your possessions fit within a shopping cart, the way you understand what you have and the way you treat it would be instructional to those of us who would just throw it out the window to the side of the road. And so there's another opportunity there for us to learn in a sense of mutuality, rather than just us being the benevolent one that is doing the wonderful thing. Yeah. Any last, here, you can just grab it there.
So I'm always wondering what's the next steps.
Yep, you're good. Next steps.
Next steps. So we are very lucky on Colonial Ave. We have the Resiliency Lab for the Elizabeth River Project, and their goal is actually educating us residents in the community about how to handle coastal resiliency. So I'm suggesting a church field trip.
Okay.
We do field trips, and then we can continue this conversation past these 6 weeks,
Yeah.
8 weeks of lectures.
So some of us have been. Melissa, what do you think? Can we do a church field trip? Melissa is the president of the board. Yeah, there we go. We got the right people in the room.
I'm so sorry, I'm jet lagged. I just came from another time zone, and it's hitting me. But I'm thrilled to hear this conversation. I helped to start the Environmental Justice, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the Elizabeth River Project, and this is fantastic, all of this enthusiasm. And I will say that love for the river, love for the environment is very universal, and disregard for recycling and reuse is also universal. So it's, I really think that it's something that affects everyone, and establishing relationships like we're doing here, or like we do with our communities along the watershed that are, disproportionately impacted by pollution. All of that is so important in order to get anything done. People have to know they are making a difference, and we are making a difference. I mean, it's very exciting. I think you would love to have a tour at Resilience Lab. It's so inspiring, a ray of sunlight in a really dark world right now.
Thank you. No, Melissa, that'd be lovely. So we'll get on that, and then if you guys want to be a part of that, sign up. We'll make it happen. We'll find a time to do it. Additionally, coming out of we've been framing a lot of our work this way, but coming out of our Holy Listening project from last year, environmental concerns were a major one for this, congregation, as well as talents and abilities. So we are well equipped to be moving into this more and more. So this 6 weeks was meant to be a sort of collection of presentations, ideas, and thoughts that then will be getting lived out more and more. So the composting is one way to do that. Building connections with community partners like ERP and others. Our Caring for Creation committee is always looking for active and interested members, and they are quite strong in their organization, and they have a sort of chart of work that they have laid out for everything from picking up trash to tending oysters, little baby oysters that'll go back into the bay. That kind of stuff so there's real practical hands-on things. And then I think the area for growth for us is that lifting up our heads and lifting up our voices a little bit so that other churches, so that our elected leaders, so that in both in Norfolk and surrounding area know that this is an issue we care about, and we are either convening conversations or making our voice heard in a way that they have to listen to. All right, so I think there's multiple levels within which to continue to work on this as well. So that, I think, is a wonderful note to end on for these 6 weeks, knowing that the conversation is not really ended, that we're hoping to continue it as we go forward. So if you have more ideas, more thoughts for ways to do that, or if you who are watching online have thoughts for us as well, we want that participation. We want that engagement from the community. All right? Now, shifting gears ever so slightly before we run off to church. Next week, we're going to start 2 weeks on a reprisal of, it's a little bit strange, but we call it our Grave Matters series. This is brought back by popular demand, believe it or not, because having proactive conversations about end-of-life issues is actually something we are commended and commissioned to do by the prayer book as priests. And if we can do it outside the context of an immediate medical situation, the temperature is low enough that we can actually do some essential work together. Now, we're not going to sit here and go through your will with you, but we're going to try to share some thoughts. The first week, we'll talk about some of the theological, the funeral planning, the spiritual side of this, as well as how to have this conversation with your loved ones, what matters to you in life, for your quality of life. And we have, every week, I'm encountering situations where people either have or have not had these conversations, and the difference in their experience as they enter into that fate which awaits us all is dramatic. So this is important work to be done. It is a little bit, people don't like to do it, but it's worthwhile. So we're going to spend the first week talking about some of the sort of the softer side of it, funerals, what's your favorite hymns, put down some notes, some readings, here's some resources, start thinking about this now, because we have files on everyone who gave us stuff. And then the next week we'll talk about medical, legal, financial, those things that need to be in line as well, because you're doing everyone you love a favor by attending to these things sooner rather than later. So that's 2 weeks. Then we have the bishop. Then we have Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, who we work with now. They're going to come and do a little visit, just sort of a one-off, tell you a little more about who they are and what they do, because we have been working with them now for a few years, and most of us don't actually know the wonderful people who run that organization. And then it'll be Advent. So believe it or not, that's what we got ahead for us these next few weeks. But thank you guys for your attention and engagement over these last 6 weeks, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you guys.